get these messages like, I just took a really big crap. You know, I go, we don't care. You know, it's, yeah.
Give a child a reason to love life. Because me, I love living. I love life, period. I don't want to die. Maybe one day I will. I love life.
Keep going, baby.
I'm not baby. I probably will. But what I'm saying is, if you give a child a reason to love life,
That's what I meant by hope, is that when people, even if they don't love it, if they even think they might love it sometime in the future, you know, that it might get better. I mean, that's why one of the first things I noticed when been a sports nut all my life, and so I knew about Satchel Paige, and actually knew he was in your system. I didn't know he was at Mount Meigs, but when I walked in there and saw that picture, and I thought, that's a picture every kid should see. You know, that no matter how bad you think it was that bad for him, and he did. Look what happened. Look what happened. And that doesn't mean every kid's going to be Satchel Paige, but, you know, they might be a father and a truck driver that makes a decent living, and and he might be loved. And I appreciate your saying that. Cognitive rigidity I talked about before. That means sort of railroad track thinking, where there's only one answer to every question. And the more you think that way, the more at risk you are for thinking suicide is the answer to your psychological pain. Hopelessness or despair. These are our enemies. And I really hope that you guys will take this lesson with you back to work and share it with your coworkers. I'd just as soon you take out, how many words are in your mission statement? Probably 500, right? 41. How about I'm going to propose to you today to change your mission statement to 2 words. Fight despair. How's that for a mission statement? Who needs the other 39 words? You know, paradigm and all kinds of stuff in there. But I mean, that's a mission you can get your arms wrapped around, don't you think? Suicidal ideation and threats. First of all, suicidal ideation is a dangerous term in mental health because you have no idea what my ideation is. No idea at all. You have no idea what any other human being is thinking. All you know is what they say and what they do. And we make inferences from that. Right? So when somebody says, I hate you, you know, he really means he's just a little angry at me, right? Well, maybe he hates you. We don't know what he means. We just know what he said. So when a child says to you, I'm going to kill myself, believe him. When he says, I'm not going to kill myself, don't. Okay, you only get 2 for free. Then I got to make a joke. Impulsivity. These kids are impulsive. That's what they are. That's how you get to Mount Meigs. That's how you get to Chalkville. That's how you get to Vaca, is by being impulsive. And, you know, I always talk, when I do these trainings about treatment, you know, I say, you know what I mean by crossing the line? I've been working with criminals of all ages for over 30 years. And I have yet to meet somebody who said, one day woke up and said, you know, I think I've taken this not being a criminal thing about as far as it's going to take me. So I think what I'm going to do is stop being a good guy, and I think I'm going to be a bad guy starting today. So I think I'm going to start committing some crimes and getting in trouble. I've never seen that happen once. Here's what happens. This is the line right here. And this is the life of one of your kids. What the heck is that? The line? When did I cross that something? I don't remember that, right? You ask them, when did you become a bad kid? They can't tell you. It ain't one now. I don't know. I got in the wrong crowd. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The dog ate my homework. It's something, right? But they didn't just get up and decide one day that they were going to be bad. They made a bad decision, most of them, in some instance. Even if they were a low-level thug, that doesn't get you to Mount Meigs either. It's usually something that they made an instantaneous, horrible decision to go with those guys instead of staying home when they knew they were going to do an armed robbery. You know, and it was that minute, and once they made that decision, the train left the station and they were on it and they were going to get in trouble. Well, it's the same thing with suicide. When people are despairing and then they get that one extra thing, and you're having a bad day and you're on the night shift as a youth services aide, and you walk by and say, what are you whining about? And the kid says, God, even the people who are supposed to help me hate me. I'm not even good at this. I'm not even good at where they throw. I'm not even good at being in the trash heap for kids, where they throw people that they don't know what else to do with. And, you know, you were just being a little cranky. And you have no idea that that was the last straw that sent this impulsive person to say, you know what, I don't even know why I'm trying. That one time that a kid says something to you that's an opportunity for a conversation and you miss it because you're not in the mood or you got a lot of work to do. You never know what's going on underneath that. Intoxication and withdrawal are risk factors. Now, generally, you guys don't have too big of a problem with homebrew, do you? I mean, it's something to be always on the watch for a homebrew or Pruno, whatever you call it, where they make alcohol. Drugs smuggled in, but if you get, you don't usually get direct admissions from arrest, do you? The kids are in custody for a little while in the counties before you get them? Yeah, so mostly this won't be as much of an issue for you guys. But if somebody appears to be intoxicated, they should go right to the nurse. And if that's true, even if you're not sure what's going on, could be saved up medication that was prescribed that they took in an effort to kill themselves, and can affect their judgment and impulsivity. History of suicide attempts. More recent is more concerning. More serious ones are more concerning. And were the circumstances similar? Now, this is what we call if you ever took a psychology class in college, one of the first things they teach is that behavior is the interaction between a person and a situation. So what that means is if you know what I did the last time I faced this situation and I haven't changed, I'm probably going to respond similarly. So one of the things we want to know when we're assessing somebody's suicide risk is, well, it says here you made a serious suicide attempt 3 years ago. What happened? What was going on? Well, that was right after my mother died, right? And then you come to find out that the kid just got a letter that his aunt died. I'd be on the lookout. I'd have a conversation with that kid because we know he responded to the death of a loved one with a serious suicide attempt. Maybe he will respond to the death of another loved one that way. And it's not a guarantee, but it's a good reason to be on the lookout and have a conversation with them and maybe make a referral. Does that make sense? The best predictor of the future is the past. Stressful events. Community stressors that lead to arrest and incarceration may also be similar to the stressors that lead to suicide, although not necessarily. Again, the institution's different. So the pressures on a person are different in the institution than they are on the street. On the street, you may have pressure from too many choices about what to do with your time. In the institution, you may be stressed by not having enough choice, just to take one example. Suicide is like all human behavior. It's an interaction between a person and situations they find themselves in. Any comments or questions about this or anything? Correctional stressors. Entry into the institution, especially if they're a first-timer. You know, they've all seen TV shows like Oz. And in Oz, you either get raped or you rape. Right? So even if they're not at risk of sexual assault, they may feel like they're at risk. And there's always some pain in the ass, 8-month veteran of Mount Meigs that's happy to tell them just what to be afraid of. Well, I'll tell you how it is in here, And they make stuff up. They may not know how long they're going to be locked up and what's going to be waiting for them when they get out of the institution. They may feel rejected by their family and by the community. There may be changes in their custody status so that they're given more or less freedom and privileges. They may be transferred from one institution to another. They got a new social order they got to figure out. So to us, if we move a kid from Mount Meigs to Vaca because we're crowded or because we think it's closer to where he's going to. But he has Mount Meigs figured out. He knows who to be nice to, who not to be nice to. He got all that figured out, how to stay safe, where to hide, how to be near the staff, which staff people he can count on in an emergency, who he can talk to, who he can't talk to. Now you move him to a new facility, he doesn't have any of that. So his anxiety may go way up. If another youth tries to commit suicide or, God forbid, kills themselves, that makes suicide a more real option for how to deal with pain. They feel a threat of assault, real or imagined. They're waiting for disciplinary action. Anything that can raise anxiety can increase the risk of suicide. Now, they did research in the Antarctic and looked at the things that cause people severe psychological distress in the Antarctic. And they could only go in there for 6 months, so they had to leave you there for 6 months in these little camps. And what they found was that some of the stressors were extremes of sounds and silence, right? Well, you may have forgotten it, but isn't this blessedly, this is something you'll never hear at Mount Meigs, right? Silence. It's always noisy. Extremes of temperature. It's very hard to keep these old buildings hot enough and cold enough, or too hot or too cold. The rumor mill, it stresses you out. Imagine how it feels to the kids. They know less than you do. And that's one of your biggest complaints is how come we're just finding this out? Or I heard such and so, and is that really true? And then there's always somebody says, oh, I can tell you that's true. And they don't know anything more than you do. Fear and loathing between officers and kids. It's a problem in every juvenile institution where I've been doing this so long, I can smell it. Which shift, which location, which officers. One of the things we did in my facilities, we kept track of who was involved in every allegation of abuse. who was involved in every incident. And I always found out there was one or two staff people that were, no matter what kind of trouble there was, they were always part of it. And then I asked the kids, tell me who you like and who you don't like among the staff. And they always say, well, you know, old Joel, we hate him, but we don't do anything because we're afraid of him. So we usually assault whoever he's working with. You know, seriously. And you know, so this big, tough, abusive staff member was getting his coworkers, the ones who were lying to protect him, was getting them hurt. Coercive environment. We don't have time to, this is like a whole different training, but I want to tell you something about obedience. When you teach a person to obey, you haven't done a damn thing to make the world safer. If all you teach a kid is to obey, you haven't helped him or the community one bit. Because unless you're going to follow him around for the rest of his life and give him orders about how to make decisions, then what good is obedience going to do him? What he really needs to learn is how to make a smarter decision. So we put him in a place where you don't get to make any decisions. Think about it. We try to restrict the amount of decisions people can make with order. Everything's order and predictability. Now, I understand why we do it. I did it myself because I had to keep too many people safe with not enough people to do it. But what we really want the kids to learn is to make better decisions. The only way to do that is to make decisions and experience consequences. But the more coercion in an environment is a stressor. It also, by the way, can be a protective factor because some kids love the predictability of a correctional environment because they grew up in chaos and violence, and they feel safe when somebody else is in charge and running the thing. So it actually works both ways. Forced associations, if you have a roommate that you wouldn't pick or your guy living next door to you is up talking at 4 o'clock in the morning so you can't get any sleep or smells bad. These are all stressors. All your favorite things are left behind. You look at the sadness of the, you know, under their mattresses, there's no Playboys. You know, tell the truth. When you were 16, what was under your mattress, right? And these are normal parts of, these normal baby mistakes that people make as part of growing up, we don't let people make in over-controlled institutions. And correctional values, don't ever ask for help, don't ever mess with anybody else's business, don't ever snitch, are all things that are kind of contrary to the kind of person we would like the kid to be when he leaves. Beyond the institution's walls are personal losses. I realize I'm generalizing when I say this, but some generalizations are valid. If you take any randomly selected kid at Vaca or at Mount Meigs or at Chalkville and ask them about the people in their life, it's amazing how much tragedy these children have lived with. It's amazing how many losses they've had. It's amazing the young ages at which they experience death of somebody close to them. And it's not just violent death. It's death from obesity or diabetes or just a lack of adequate medical care. Their lives suck. And we're trying to fix something that is, it's a disease in our society that they're the casualties of. If you think about it, they're like the victims of a war that we're losing, right? So these are all things that affect suicide and that we have to be aware of. The sense of isolation and disconnectedness we already talked about. Family, if they haven't left you behind, you may have conflict with the family. Loss of social supports. They're not that healthy. They look healthy because they tend to, they're young and they can play basketball, but they haven't had good health care in their life. Many of them haven't had good nutrition in their life. And sad to say, institutional nutrition usually isn't that much better. Dates of personal significance. If the anniversary of their mother's death and a kid tells you, here's his mother talking to him, you refer that person. Actual mental illness, schizophrenia, depressive disorders, manic depressive illness, or what we now call bipolar disorder. All these things are tied to higher rates of suicide. Substance abuse, it's close to 100% of your kids have histories of some substance use. All these things are correlated with higher rates of suicide. Behavioral markers and warning signs. Any evidence of hopelessness, feelings of hopelessness, despair, helplessness. There's nothing I can do to make my life better. And for some of the places where you have the most coercive staff who run a tight ship, one of the things that you experience if you're on a tight ship is this ship runs the way it wants to run no matter what I do. So I don't get anything for acting good, and I don't lose anything for being a pain in the neck. These are all things that take away my sense of personal effectiveness. So if I think it doesn't matter what I do, that's one less reason to take myself out. I keep putting this up here because it's so important. Any change in demeanor can be a warning sign. So if somebody who's fat and eats all the time suddenly starts to eat less, take a moment and ask them if they're on a diet or not. That could be a sign of, I finally decided to get healthy, or it could be, I'm so depressed I don't have any desire to eat. Changes in sleep. If some of these kids really care about their shower and they try to dress, as well as you can, suddenly start to look sloppy. Ask a question. Doesn't cost anything. Ask those extra questions. Those can be signs of deteriorating mood or mental status. Significant changes in behavior. If a kid suddenly starts to get a bunch of write-ups or suddenly stops getting write-ups. At this stage of the game, these are just reasons to ask a few questions. Any evidence of despair, changes in hygiene. Anhedonia is a fancy word for sadness, but it means a little more than sadness. It means anhedonia literally means no joy. So you can be sad, but you still like to watch a football game, or you still enjoy a letter from home. But some people get so profoundly sad that nothing gives them joy. One of the things I do for suicide risk assessments, I try to tell the person a joke or say something that's funny to see if they can even laugh. And even if it's a stupid joke, they might laugh at me and say, that's a stupid joke, instead of, yeah, whatever. If your kids say whatever to you, it just means they're teenagers. But when a person's whole life says whatever, that's despair. This one, we always put this on the list because somebody wrote it years ago. Actually, I've never seen anybody do that, so I'm not sure whether that's a real risk factor or not, but it's in every book about suicide, so I had to include it. And for goodness sake, if somebody's talking about death, don't assume it's just kids being kids. Ask some questions about it. Well, actually, you have a choice. You can take a break and leave at 1, or we can plow through and leave at 12:30. Is that all right? Okay. Now I got to get moving. Keep my promise. Somebody's crying, has a lot of restlessness, or any extremely more active, like restlessness, or a lot less active, like they're lethargic. Either one could be a sign. Excessive fatigue. You're not supposed to be that tired at 16. That's usually a sign of depression, or it can be. changes in appetite, despair, sleep changes in sleep pattern. That's why your night shift is so important. If somebody is up till all hours and that's not their usual pattern, that can be a real good sign that something's wrong. Poor concentration, that'll come up in school. Make sure that the teachers are making referrals. Expressions of guilt. When, we want the kids to feel some sense of responsibility and remorse, right? If they don't, you mark that down as a bad thing. But if a tough kid suddenly starts telling you how guilty he feels about all the bad things he's done in his life, ask some extra questions to find out just how guilty he feels and what punishment he thinks he's got coming, or she. Extremes of rage often get, in a place where you can't act out your rage, sometimes people turn it on themselves. Myths and misconceptions about suicide. Here's one. If somebody talks about suicide, then they really don't mean it, or else they wouldn't talk about it. Well over half of all suicide deaths are preceded by somebody talking about it. So that is not true. Next, asking about suicide might give somebody the idea. So here's the notion. Now, I'm sad to say some mental health professionals still believe this. Is like, if I ask them about suicide, it might put the idea in his head. So this is their belief. Ring. Hi, suicide hotline. Can you hold? No, I'm just kidding. Suicide hotline. I'm really sad, and my whole family hates me, and I root for the Florida Gators. Oh, well, have you thought about killing yourself? Oh, what a great idea. Thanks, buddy. Right? That's the notion. Like, somebody's profoundly depressed, but they've never thought about ending their life. And you're going to you're so powerful that if you even mention it, they're going to run off and do it. Right? So, if they root for the Gators, they already thought about it. I was going to go with Auburn, Bama, but I didn't know which side I was going to get in the most trouble with, so I figured I'd just play it safe, Well, it's a good way to start a fight between you guys, though. But asking about suicide that is not true. You're not going to put the idea in their head. It's okay to ask. Have you thought about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Should I be worried about you? Another misconception. Well, he was really down, but now he's happy, so everything must be okay. Sometimes when people have decided on their exit strategy, it takes a load off their mind. I'm not going to be in pain anymore because I'm going to be dead. So any change doesn't necessarily mean a change for the better. Now, methods of suicide and corrections. Of course, hanging is one of the most easy to accomplish and quite lethal. If you asphyxiate yourself by hanging, you can be dead in about 5 minutes. Is there any medical professionals here? Doctors? You tell me if I get anything wrong. However, if you cut off the circulation through the carotid artery, you can be unconscious in far less time. 30 seconds of pressure on the carotid, even you can be unconscious, right? And you could be dead in a minute or so, or brain damage. So hanging is especially lethal. Did I get that reasonably right? Okay, thanks. I can say anything I want if there's no actual doctors, but I got to be careful. Overdose. Here we provide the instrument of death. A whole bunch of kids are on medications, and any medication that can help you can hurt you if you take enough of it. So if somebody stores up a lot of medication that's ordinarily going to be helpful to them, they can kill themselves. And one of the most lethal is Tylenol. If you overdose on Tylenol, it causes liver damage it can kill you. Swallowing dangerous objects, that's actually very unlikely to kill you, but it can cost a fortune in medical care. Drinking toxic substances. Again, there's all kinds of toxic substances in an institution, as simple as cleaning materials, that need to be protected. Jumpers. It's not a good way to kill yourself. It's a great way to become quadriplegic, though. And so we got to make sure that if somebody's on deemed to be at high risk of suicide, that they're not upstairs. Starvation is an extraordinarily difficult way to die and extraordinarily painful, so very unlikely way. If somebody says they're on a hunger strike, the treatment of choice is a scale. Significant proportion of hunger strike people gain weight because they're sneaking Snickers all the time. And seriously, so just because somebody gives you their meal back and says they're not eating, now if somebody really does start to lose weight, then that's a medical issue and they need to be referred for medical and mental health care right away. Head banging is a bad way to die, but a great way to cause brain damage. And you can die. If you happen to cause a subdural hematoma, it can be lethal. And often, sometimes when people have car accidents and they think they're okay, and they didn't really hit their head that hard, but they got to bleed, and if you see any type of head injury that's followed within a few hours by a significant change in their mental status, that's a medical emergency. Yes? Get them evaluated by somebody that knows more than you do. Provoking others, one of the reasons we don't have weapons inside of institutions is because they get in the wrong hands or used the wrong way, so that's an unlikely one here. Opportunity, the times when you're least likely to be observed are high-risk times. So midnight to the early morning. Times when there's high demand but low observation. So when you're being pushed to do stuff in school, but it's hard to keep track of everybody when everybody's milling about in school, those are times that are higher risk times for somebody to slip off. Shift change or times of minimal staffing. Weekends, you typically have lower staffing. Holidays, you often have lower staffing. These are all times of opportunity for somebody who wants to hurt themselves. Now, the decision process typically works like this. Somebody's going along, minding their business, and their stressors start to build up to a point where they become intolerable. And if the person feels hopeless and helpless in terms of what they can do to make their stress go down or their distress go down or their anxiety to go down, and they start to feel helpless and it doesn't matter what I do, there's no way for me to feel better. At this point, they might consider death or self-harm as one option, but they haven't decided to kill themselves. And their main desire is to, as I said before, is to escape psychological pain. This is a really important point. Everybody who's suicidal is ambivalent, meaning part of them wants to die and part of them wants to live. Right? It's like they got a devil in one ear telling them to take themselves out and an angel in the other ear telling them, oh, you know, life might get better. We don't want the devil to win. This is despair. This is hope. We don't want despair to win. Despair is our enemy. And so the notion that, oh, you don't really want to kill yourself is true, but they also do want to kill themselves. And if you disregard the death part of this equation because you think you're smart and you know that if you really wanted to die, you'd already be dead, you could actually be increasing the risk that they'll take themselves out. Then at some point they make a decision to act. It's often impulsive. And they may just simply act right away or plan to kill themselves This is obviously much more dangerous and lethal than the impulsive act. And if they do plan, they'll start agitated, and when they come up with a plan, they may suddenly get peaceful. Trust your instincts. You can intervene at any point in this progression and save a life. Trust your instincts. And you may never know when a kind word from you or a smile took a person who was headed down that path I just showed you and sent them on a willingness to live another day. When an expression of hope or I love life and I used to feel as bad as you do, and maybe things can turn around for you like they did for me, it don't cost you nothing to share that, and it's a message of hope and life. So as I said, the suicide risk prevention program has screening and referral. It has crisis intervention. We have a predictable suicide watch routine and supervision routine. And we have a whole institution that's always thinking about keeping people alive. Those of you who use service aids, do you do room inspections regularly? Once a week, is it? Every day? What I want you to do is, in Georgia, they had me go through all the prisons and find suicide hazards in their rooms that they were putting people that were suicidal. And I go in with a handkerchief. And I tell people, I got 4 ways to kill myself in here. And they go, there are no ways to kill yourself in here. And then I show them where there's a gap between this exit sign and the wall that needs to be caulked. And I can slip my handkerchief behind it and hold myself up with it. There's a piece of conduit. There's a switch plate that has security screws, but the edge of the switch plate's sticking out and it's sharp, and I can cut my arm like this. Rip it this way, and you can't get it stitched up fast enough. I go into almost any room in your facilities and show you how I would kill myself in there. You have to start thinking that way. How would I kill myself in this room? And you'll find things that you haven't seen before because you weren't looking through these eyes, these trained eyes of how would I do it. In the best room I've ever seen, where it was completely experts had looked at it, I said, I could still kill myself in this room. They said, what would you hang anything from? And I said, I would figure out a way to get you to open the door, and when you closed it, I'd tie a little knot in the ligature and stick it in the door, so when you close it, it's nice and tight for me. And you can't see it from out there because it's in the crack between the door and the door jamb. So you got to start thinking that way. In order to prevent these things from happening, you got to see the risks. And the only way I know to do it is to say, how would I kill myself in this room? Do it as a game with your coworkers and see who can find the most hazards. And then and many of them can be fixed. When you see a piece that's coming out from the wall, security caulk it's easier to get through the wall than it is to get through security caulk. And now obviously we're not going to try to make the whole institution safe. I'm talking about the rooms where we put people who are explicitly on a 15-minute watch or on constant observation. Now constant observation, I'm actually less worried about because you're watching them. But for the 15-minute watches, we don't want it to be easy to take yourself out. Of all the gifts you will ever give to these kids, the greatest gift of all is hope. I started with this, and I want to wrap up with it, that this notion that we have to be tough and that we have to, spare the rod, spoil the child. I got to be honest with you. When I hear the words tough love, I cringe, because in my life of doing this work, I've seen tough love more over and over and over again is an excuse for cruelty from one human being to another. Nobody ever got spoiled by love, I'll tell you that. People might have gotten spoiled by a lack of guidance, or by violence, or by, but love never spoiled anybody. And giving people hope, you don't have to make it easy. You don't have to say all you got to do is roll over and everything will be fine. You can say, well, you got a lot of work to do, but you can make your life good. And most of the kids will tell you that the staff that they respect the most aren't easy staff. They can be quite demanding. Sometimes they're the staff that are tough people that have high standards. But they all have the same basic things, is that they see the possibilities of a better life for these children whose lives suck. And if you don't get that, if you think that they're ruining their life is some kind of scam to irritate you, you're in the wrong business. You can't do this work. I promised you to be out of here by 12:30. I'm 10 minutes early, so I'm just going to talk for 10. No, I'm just kidding. I just want to close by first of all, I want to ask you all, is there any questions or comments you have about anything we talked about all day today? Is there anything that I wasn't clear about or that you want to disagree with? Please speak up. Yes, ma'am.
One question. I was reading about kids coming in tomorrow. It said that you were talking about suicidal ideation. It says he was hospitalized, getting hospitalized for suicidal ideation. I've always wondered about that. How do you know what they're thinking?
Well, what they mean when they say that is he was hospitalized because he said he was thinking of killing himself. So it was really for suicidal verbiage. And they believed him, and that's not inappropriate to do, but it is important to understand. And by the way, one of the things that I'm going to tell the clinicians on Thursday is there is no such thing as a contract for safety. Have any of you ever heard of that term, a contract for safety? You promise me you won't kill yourself till Monday? There is no evidence. I did a literature search for a case I was working on. There is not one single study in the history of psychology and psychiatry that says that contracts for safety are a valid way of saying that somebody's safe. Now, the opposite is not true. If somebody tells you that they're going to kill themselves, I want you to believe them. If somebody tells you that they're not, your work isn't finished yet. That's part of the assessment, is what they say, but it is not all of the assessment. So if somebody's, braiding the rope that they're going to hang themselves with, no, I won't do it till you get back on Monday. I promise. First of all, why would they do that? Like, as a convenience to you to make sure you're here when I kill myself? So do not believe people when they say they're not going to kill themselves without more. But if they say they are, then believe them. Any other comments or questions? I'm going to keep you here until 12:30, one way or the other. So if you have any, it's all right. You're not going to get out any earlier. Yes, sir.
One thing I was wondering about is I listened to not too long ago, I looked into the cell, I spoke to this kid, I asked him what his name was, he kept mumbling something. Then I went in there, I asked him what his name was again, and he said his voice was returning to kill himself. I noticed a peculiar odor when I was in there, and I said, what are you eating? He said, my boo-boo, eating pieces.
I knew what he meant.
But then, I mentioned this to the nurse, she called Dr. Shaw, and, case man came after him in a real professional manner. Soft correction. Superior, I guess you would say. Instructed to ask the kid if he planned
It don't sound like a question so far. It sounds like a pretty good assessment so far. I agree with everything you just said. I wouldn't believe him at all. That most likely, once other people started talking to him, the voices receded because he was getting other stimulation from his environment. And so I would be very concerned about that kid until we had some more behavioral data. If in fact he was telling you the truth about the voices, how old was he approximately?
I'd say probably, maybe, I'm not sure, 15.
So 15-year-old kid hearing voices, that's a medical emergency, I think. That he needs to see a psychiatrist to see whether, we don't know at this point, is he high? Does he have a toxic psychosis? Does he have if we didn't know him to have a serious mental illness, now maybe we just missed it, it's very possible, but I would want somebody who knew what they were doing to evaluate that kid and be cautious. That's a very dangerous combination, is psychosis plus command hallucinations for suicide is a bad combination. And so I would be real cautious with that person. And I would have put that person, even if he said, oh no, I was just playing, I'd say, well, we're going to watch you play for a while to see how you're doing before we believe you.
I didn't think he was playing because he didn't know I was going to look in there.
I didn't think he was playing either. I think you're,
Like I say, he didn't know anybody was going.
yeah, I don't know any game where you eat feces. I can't, that's, I think that you were right, and you did a good thing by referring them to the mental health professionals. Any other comments or questions?
Question.
Yes, sir.
Right now in the news, there's a big story about a college kid who killed himself because of his sexual orientation on the internet.
Yeah, up in Northeast.
Right. And my makes are a lot of kids that have sexual issues. How do we as first line staff recognize one of our kids that was sexually like this is in a situation where he may be considered suicide? And if you do recognize it, how do you encourage him to not do it? What do you say to him to not be with that type of mindset?
Well, if a kid levels with you that he's catching heat because of his sexual orientation, usually the kids, if somebody is got sexual identity issues, the other kids will pick up on it and somebody will try to exploit it. So part of the issue is, the first step is to make sure that the kid's safe. And that may mean a change in housing unit. It may be a place where he's going to get a little more observation as a victim, not for anything he's going to do. The second thing is, it isn't so much the sexual orientation that creates a risk as it is, the kid that killed himself that you're referring to, he was doing fine until his roommate decided to put his business on Facebook or something. So it was what was done to him. It wasn't his sexual orientation. We don't even know if he was gay. He might have just been experimenting at that stage of the game. But, if your first love experience, whatever your sexual orientation, was public, it would be a humiliating, thing for anybody. And so for your kids, where humiliation can mean danger, because any sign of weakness in a correctional environment translates to danger. So the first step would be making sure that the kid is safe. The second step would be figuring out a safe way that the kid can talk about it, whether that's with you, with another staff member, with a mental health professional, with a case manager, finding somebody that the kid has some ability to talk through these things with. And then last of all, one thing you can let them know for sure is that there's a place for everybody in this world. You may think that there's no place for you because this is a new thing for you, or you're wrestling with your identity, but you're not the Lone Ranger. Whatever it is that you're going through, other people have gone through, and some of them came out the other side of it and found a safe place, a good place for themselves to be, and maybe that can happen for you too. But first step would be make sure the kid's safe. Second step would be refer for some help from within the institution. And you're absolutely right. This is way more common than we deal with it. And part of it's our fault because a lot of staff aren't that comfortable talking about sexuality. A lot of staff have their own issues about homosexuality either it scares them or it makes them mad or they have religious feelings about it. So it may create an environment where the kid doesn't want to talk about it and is dealing with it all internally, and they're not that good at that. So that's a great question that you raised. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to close by saying thank you for your time and attention today. Thank you for the work you do with other people's children. Thank you for keeping the community safer. Thank you for keeping these kids alive and safe. And thanks for the lives that you've saved, even if you don't know that you did it. And thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate your time. And it's 12:30.